Hey there, solar folk. I am the Solar Boy. A couple of months ago, we took a look at the installation process for the GEN24 inverter that's just come out in the States in the last several months. But today we're going to take a closer look at the monitoring portal for that installation, both to see how it's been doing, how has it been producing compared to the old inverter, but also what are the things that you can do remotely, troubleshooting-wise, with Fronius Solar.Web. So you're at another site, maybe the customer's called you and they're asking you questions about the production of the inverter. When you boot up your laptop, what can you see? What can you change? What can you do? We're going to take a look at all of that. So I'm going to pull up Solar.Web a while, and we're going to take a look at some of the historical data. Now, this inverter was installed in 2010, and the original inverter's data card was fried by a surge in 2011. So we don't have a whole lot of historical data. So we're going to have to go all the way back to 2011. We're going to compare January of 2025 to January of 2011, which is kind of a wild comparison. Hopefully you don't have that big a gap in your data, but it's just what we have to go off of for right now. Okay, so here is our site. As you can see, our current power is about 3.89 kW. Our curve is a little bit irregular today. It's definitely been cloudy. It's not been full sun. And, you know, it's February, so what are you going to do? I'm going to head over to the Analysis tab. And right here, you can see the current power that is, like, right now being produced. But we're going to go to the History section. So right now, we have a bunch of stuff selected for right now. We are going to go back in history, though, first. We're going to go find... Let's go back to 2011 and go to January. You can see right there, cuts off in June. Sad story, but it is what it is. So from here, we're going to click into January and take a look at this month's stuff. So you can see there's a couple of days here where I'm sure there was like snow cover, inclement weather, something of the kind. That happens in January. Our total production for this month is 823.19 kWh, which is pretty decent for January. And I'm going to open up another tab here so we can switch back and forth and compare numbers quickly together. And we're going to go to 2025, go to January, and we can see the full month here. So here you also see we have a couple of snow days here. I do know that these were times of inclement weather, which, you know, that's never helpful for production. So in January of 2025, we have a total month production of 867.95 kilowatt hours right up here. And if we go to 2011, we've got 823 kilowatt hours. So we are still, even, 14 years later, producing almost the same as what we were before. But the month is not the entire view, because obviously you could have a couple of extra snow days in 2011 that would knock it down. So let's look at a couple of comparable production days. So in doing prep for this, I think the best numbers that we have to compare to between 2011 and 2025 is January 24th for January 2011, because we've got a pretty nice curve with the exception of that little dip right there. And in 2025, it's the 27th. I think these are our highest production days in both Januaries. So seems like a good thing to compare to. Now, in 2025, our day production is 56 kWh. In 2011, it's also 56 kWh. Not bad at all. We are a tiny bit less on the 2025 day, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that different. We are still making good production out of this system. But let's take a closer look at what parameters we can look at now. So the original inverter was an IG+. It was, I think, Fronius' first generation. Don't quote me on that. That's just me thinking out of the top of my brain. So in this history view, you can go into devices. You can select which device is relevant. Obviously, this Gen24 here is grayed out because it didn't exist in 2011. So all we have to select is the IG+. And for our channels, we have current DC MPP1, so one DC maximum power point tracker. We got our standardized power, which is basically, if we click OK on that, that is like a percentage of how much power could possibly be put out for that particular time, like basically a percentage of kW. We're not going to really look at that one. That one's not super helpful. We also have AC voltage, DC voltage on that one MPP tracker, as well as total power. So we're going to stick with DC current, total power, and voltage. And we can see this voltage tracking up at the beginning of the day as it's finding the best voltage it can, and dipping down as the sun goes up and bringing that current up, finding that nice balance. Over here we have this little dip. It doesn't look like the voltage really accommodates hardly at all. And I think in these older generations, there wasn't as much fast adaptation to the maximum power point tracker as there are in these current generations. So let's take a look at the current generation and see what values we have to look at there. Over here already, I have set up a bunch more options. Now, let's look at the channels and see what all of our options are. And when we do that, we can see apparent power, we can see AC current, obviously 2 DC currents because there's 2 maximum power point trackers in here. So those track separately. Those are already on the screen here. You can look at power factor. You can look at the power for each maximum power point tracker, which doesn't exist as a thing to track in the old one. You could look at reactive power if you want to. Obviously, there's that standardized power one there, and AC voltage. So we're, just for the sake of comparison, going to look at how it tracks between the MPP trackers, the voltage and the current and the total power. In the morning here is the most interesting to me. We have these maximum power point trackers going all over the place as they're trying to find the best place to run power at. And you can actually see here, because there's 2 maximum power point trackers, you can see on this one is that's maximum power point tracker 2, it looks like. I wonder if there's a chimney up on that roof, and I wonder if this is where that chimney is shading the array just a little bit in the morning. So here at like 8:15, you can see MPP2 at 360 volts, trying to get its 0.79 amps. MPP1 is at 2.13 amps, 323 volts. So they are tracking separately from each other and being able to accommodate better for their given set of strings. And they do around like 9:25, 9:30, they start syncing back up, and they are running more or less neck and neck for the whole day here. But yeah, absolutely respectable performance for an array that is now 14 years old. And I looked up the panel manufacturer. I don't remember the exact panel. I think it's like a 224 watt panel, and I think there's 44 of them up there. So it's 9 point something kW. It's like 9.5 kW. The inverter is oversized to the DC system, which is not typically how we do things now. But even at this peak, which is less, like this is 878 kW, I think, over here at its peak in 2025, and then over here at its peak of production, we're at like 9.03. So if we're comparing production, we're still at 97% of the production on this array, either because the panels are just holding up or because the inverter is able to better use them now. If you look at the manufacturer specs, I think that they say like 5% degradation in the first 10 years, and like for the rest after that, we're looking at like 15-20%. Panel manufacturers will over-exaggerate that sometimes, but all I'm saying is we're doing good. Oh, something I did forget to mention is that we also, now with the Gen24, we have the ability to check isolation on your array. So if you're having problems with ground faults, you can see what days the isolation is changing. For this day in January of 27, our kilo ohms we have like 3 megohms of resistance here. But as we have ground fault issues in the future, we'll be able to take a look at when those values drop, when they, as they fluctuate, and maybe be able to hone in a little bit on some of those hints and details. Now, aside from production data, what else can we do on Solar.Web that is different about the Gen24? We can go back to our configurations. So we can go back to our main page over here. We're going to take a look at settings and go into settings. A lot of this stuff is going to be blurred because I'm not about to give my customers information away. You can't have them. once we get over here to components, we can see a little bit more about what we can do. So with these newer inverters, you are able to remotely update them. This was also true of the Snap inverters. But when there's a firmware update available to install, that's going to show up here underneath the firmware version in this update section. But what is new as of this firmware 1.33.7 is you can go over here to device settings. And this is in beta, but this allows you to remotely access the settings of your inverter. It's going to say, secure connection to the device has been established. We're going to open the web interface. This was just released like in the last week. So this is brand new. But we are now, right now, as I'm sitting on another site, over my cell connection, I am tunneled into my customer's inverter. So if there are problems that maybe a configuration change would solve, I can do that here as long as it's got internet and I've got internet. It brings up our splash screen of how much we're producing, what its state is. We can go into advanced and see all the real-time values that this inverter is putting out. Now, a lot of this you can get from the portal anyway, but let's go over here where the real juicy stuff is. There's the menu button over here. And we're going to go to device configuration. And you will need your technician password to be able to log into this. So not just anybody, even if you get access to a portal of somebody, right? You still have to have the device password for that inverter. So I'm gonna put that in here. I think that's the right one. That is the wrong one. I think that's the right one. That's correct. So we're gonna go back to, again, so we're at device configuration. Let's look at the components. So we can here change our maximum power point trackers. Say, for instance, that you had actually combined these all together and forgot that you needed to turn off MPP2 and turn on PV1 and PV2. I'm not going to change those settings right now, but you could. You can also add a component if you forgot to configure your meter while you were on site for some reason. You can throw in the information for your Fronius smart meter. If you have the IP address, Modbus address, that kind of stuff, you could just do that remotely. Or even if your company is set up where the people on site may not know how to configure this kind of stuff, an office person can support them in a remote fashion and, talk back and forth and have things go more efficiently that way. You can change up your load management settings if you need to change anything on your pins. Basically anything that you need to change on this inverter that you could do on site while directly connected to it, you can do here, as far as I can tell. I also know there have been times where we've installed a system, we're waiting for PTO, we're not allowed to turn it on yet, we're waiting for the power company to say so. We will sometimes put inverters into standby, and you could do that now with a Fronius inverter and take it out of standby here on this page. You can enforce standby, and I could save that, and it would keep the inverter at standby, it would not produce. We're gonna cancel that, because we want this to keep running. And that was just device configuration. You can get into energy management, system, communication, safety, and grid regulations. This one looks like that's gonna take another password, which is correct and good. You should not be able to just change that after it's already been set up. But basically, at a high level, this means that you can offer your customer really robust remote support. And it's really exciting that Fronius has this now. This kind of thing is something that other inverter companies have released to some extent. This is the one that's worked the best for me, I think. And this is the one that's like the most direct to the inverter that I've played with. It seems really thought out. It seems really well done. It does not feel beta-y to me at all. But, do be cautious. Your mileage may vary. But now that we're done looking at Solar.Web, I did want to bring up batteries again. Because the GEN24, while that was released last fall, the GEN24 Plus is now released, and you can upgrade your existing GEN24 to the Plus version. What I saw on the Fronius shop, or Up Storage, was $919 for that upgrade. And the current compatible batteries with it are the BYD batteries. And of course, beyond the BYD batteries, there's a number of other components involved, but you can create a pretty significant backup for a sub panel in your house with just an inverter with batteries on it. It's pretty nice. I hope to be able to show you that entire process someday in the future, but that will have to be another video. I hope you enjoyed walking through this comparison with me. I always find it fun to go back to old systems and see what they're doing and see how they perform over time. And I'm glad you came along with me. Thanks again to Fronius for sponsoring this video, and until next time, stay shiny.